My name is Jude Carter, and if you'd asked me on that Tuesday morning how my day would turn out, I would have said something boring. Maybe I'd grab tacos after my flight home, maybe I'd catch a ball game on TV, maybe I'd even surprise my wife with flowers to smooth over the little cracks that had been showing between us. That's the kind of day I expected. Not the kind that splits your life into before and after. I'd spent 3 days in Dallas at a conference that was more about buzzwords than business. Synergy, market penetration, holistic solutions, corporate nonsense designed to sound smart while saying absolutely nothing. When the organizers wrapped up early, I should have taken it as a sign. Life rarely hands me gifts without slipping a knife in with the ribbon, but I was too relieved to notice. I grabbed my suitcase, called a cab, and decided to play the devoted husband for once. The plan was simple. Stop by Mrs. Petra's flower shop on the corner. Buy a dozen roses, the bright red ones Sienna always loved. Show up at our bungalow with a smile, a corny surprise, and maybe, just maybe, get back on the same page with her. 3 days away felt like the perfect excuse to stage a small cinematic homecoming. The cab ride back into Austin felt unusually light. My driver Tund spent 20 minutes bragging about his niece making varsity volleyball, showing me blurry pictures on his cracked phone like they were treasures. After 3 days of being trapped with corporate zombies, his excitement felt like fresh air. I nodded, said all the right "that's great" lines, and secretly enjoyed the noise of someone else's real joy. When he dropped me off, I even tipped more than usual. From the street, our little house looked exactly the way it should: porch light, glowing oak tree. We planted casting shadows across the lawn, everything neat and ordinary. Home. That word settled in my chest like a warm drink. Roses in one hand, suitcase in the other, I walked up the steps, already rehearsing the look on Sienna's face when she opened the door. The door gave its usual sticky protest as I unlocked it. I stepped inside, expecting vanilla candles and the faint smell of leftover takeout. Instead, the air felt wrong, heavier, charged like the seconds before a thunderstorm cracks open the sky. Something in me tightened. I called out Sienna silence. The living room was spotless, almost staged. The throw blanket, folded pillows lined up everything too neat for a Tuesday afternoon. At first glance, it should have calmed me. No signs of chaos, no obvious problem. But neatness has its own way of feeling suspicious, like someone prepared for inspection. Then I saw it. Draped across the arm of the chair by the window, a suit jacket. Not mine. Not anything I'd ever seen before. Navy tailored sharp in a way you don't find at outlet malls. When I lifted it, I noticed the details, the stitching, the fabric, the weight of money woven into every seam. Inside the pocket, 2 letters stared back at me, sewn in thread that gleamed under the light AV. My stomach dropped. I knew enough about initials to know who they belonged to. Adrian Voss, CEO, my wife's boss. A man I'd shaken hands with at Christmas parties, endured small talk with at company dinners. He was successful, charming in that polished way, the type of guy who looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. And his jacket was in my living room. I stood there, frozen roses dangling stupidly from my hand. There were excuses I could cling to. Maybe he'd dropped it off. Maybe she'd borrowed it. Maybe anything but what my gut already knew. I should have turned around right there, walked back out the door, called it a day, and lived in ignorance for a little longer. But I'm not built that way. I had to know. Step by step, I climbed the stairs. Each one felt heavier, as though the house itself didn't want me going up. The roses started to feel ridiculous, bright red against the dull grip of dread in my chest. My suitcase knocked against my leg, its weight suddenly useless, just one more thing holding me down. At the top, I paused. Behind the bedroom door came the muffled sound of voices. Low, close, too close. My hand shook as I reached for the doorknob. There are moments when your entire life hangs on whether or not you open a door. I opened mine. The scene locked itself into my memory instantly, a picture burned too deep to ever fade. Sienna, my wife, sat up in our bed. Our bed. Her eyes widened, face drained of color. Beside her, turning toward me with the same calm confidence I'd seen at corporate events, was Adrian Voss. Shirtless, relaxed even. And when our eyes met, he didn't look embarrassed, didn't look apologetic. He smirked like this was a game and I had just lost. For a second, everything inside me went silent. No shouting, no rage. Just a quiet hum in my head as though my mind refused to process the sight. The roses slipped from my hand onto the floor. The sound of them landing was louder than anything else in the room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I stood still, heart pounding, looking at the two people who had just detonated my marriage in a single instant. People imagine that when you walk in on betrayal, you explode. That you yell, throw things, maybe even throw punches. I'd pictured myself that way, too fiery righteous, unwilling to take it quietly. But when it actually happened, I felt the exact opposite. A strange, icy calm washed over me. My brain seemed to float above the room as if I were watching someone else's disaster play out on a screen. Adrian smirked at me like he'd already won. That expression was gasoline on whatever fire still smoldered in my chest. I didn't lunge at him. I didn't scream at Sienna. I did something far simpler. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and with the steadiest voice I've ever used in my life, I said, I just sent your wife a video of you two. For a moment, Adrian's smirk faltered. The color drained from his face, his confidence leaking out like air from a punctured tire. His phone sitting on the nightstand buzzed violently. He grabbed it too fast, fumbled, and in his panic, hit speaker. Adrian. A woman's voice sharp as broken glass. Cold, controlled, lethal. I knew the voice instantly. Marina Voss, his wife. I'd met her once, briefly at a holiday event. She carried herself like someone who'd never lost an argument in her life. "What am I looking at?" she demanded. 6 words delivered with surgical precision. Adrian stammered. "Marina, this isn't... Don't come home." The line went dead. Just like that. No raised voice, no dramatic scene, just a sentence dropped like a verdict. Adrian stood there, phone in hand, suddenly smaller than I'd ever thought he could look. The silence that followed was unbearable. Sienna pulled the sheet tighter around herself, whispering my name like it was a magic word that could undo the last 30 seconds. I didn't answer. Adrian scrambled for his clothes. He moved like the floor was on fire, yanking on his shirt backwards, stumbling over his shoes. The same man who had just looked at me with triumph now couldn't get out fast enough. He didn't say a word. Not to me, not to Sienna. He bolted the door, slamming behind him, his car engine revving as though he could outrun what had just happened. And then it was just me and her. Sienna's eyes were wide, wet, desperate. "Jude," she said, voice breaking. "It's not what it looks like." The most insulting line anyone could use in that moment. I shook my head, not because I didn't hear her, but because there was nothing left to say. My silence was louder than any accusation. She tried again. "Please, we can talk about this." Her words fell flat against the heavy air. Talk about what the sheet clutched to her chest was answer enough. I turned away, picked up the roses from the floor. They looked absurd now, bright red against the gray wreckage of trust. I set them gently on the dresser like evidence in a case that needed no further witnesses. Then I walked downstairs. In the kitchen, the wall clock ticked with mechanical indifference. Each second stretched like a lifetime. My body moved automatically, filling the coffee maker, pressing the button, watching the dark liquid drip as though routine could anchor me to something normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Questions came rushing in, each sharper than the last. How long? How many nights had I sat at this table alone while she told me she was working late? How many business dinners had really been dinners for 2? How many excuses had I swallowed without chewing because I trusted her? The reel of my own stupidity played in my head in high definition. The late-night strategy meetings that somehow always lasted until midnight. The new jewelry she claimed came from her team as a reward. The way she suddenly guarded her phone, flipping it face down like it held national secrets. Signs I'd chosen not to read. I thought of the jacket again. A.V. Adrian Voss. His initials weren't just stitched into fabric, they were stitched into the unraveling of my marriage. Upstairs, I heard movement. The creak of drawers, the zip of a bag. She was packing something. Part of me wanted to storm up, demand answers, demand apologies. Another part, the part that had finally learned the futility of words, stayed glued to the chair. When she came down, she was still clutching a small bag, hair, messy eyes rimmed red. She hovered in the doorway like a shadow. "Can we please talk?" she whispered. I looked at her then back at the clock. "Not now." 2 words. That was all I could give. She nodded like she understood, though I could see she didn't. She lingered, maybe waiting for me to stop her, maybe hoping for a shred of forgiveness. I stayed silent. Finally, she opened the door. The latch clicked. Gone. Through the window, I saw our neighbor, Mr. Whitmore, trimming his roses in his front yard. He looked over, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment. He didn't mouth a platitude. He didn't offer pity. He just nodded a quiet recognition between 2 men, one who knew storms could only be endured, not explained. I sat there until the coffee went cold. The house around me felt foreign. The photographs on the fridge, smiling faces, beach trips, holidays looked like lies printed on glossy paper. Every corner of the home we'd built together suddenly carried a different weight, a different meaning. I should have felt anger. Instead, I felt hollow, emptiness where love had once lived, space where trust had once stood. But emptiness, I realized, is also a kind of space. And space invites a choice. I grabbed my keys. If my marriage had collapsed in silence, then I wasn't going to sit here drowning alone. There was someone else who had just lost everything in the same moment I had. Someone who deserved to hear the truth directly. Marina Voss. Tarrytown looks like certainty. Manicured hedges, brick walkways that never crack, doors that close softly because they were designed to. That afternoon, I stood on one of those doorsteps and rang a bell that sounded like it had a college degree. When the door opened, Marina Voss filled it, precise blazer, steady eyes, posture that belonged at a board table. She didn't ask who I was. "Mr. Carter," she said, stepping aside. Not a question. A record entry. Inside the townhouse was cool and deliberate. Marble island, stainless appliances with more computing power than my laptop. A living room where nothing slumped or faltered. She poured coffee the way some people deliver verdicts, no wasted motion, no performative comfort. We sat across from each other at the island, 2 strangers connected by the same impact crater. "How long?" she asked. No pleasantries, no condolences. I told her what I had, what I'd walked in on the jacket with initials, the call she had ended with 6 syllables and a closed line. She listened like a surgeon listens for the part that determined whether the patient made it or not. Then she unlocked her phone and placed it between us. "Let's match schedules." What followed didn't feel like gossip. It felt like an audit. She opened Adrian's shared calendars, travel receipts, auto-synced reminders, tiny dots on a map of decision-making. I opened my email bank app and that folder of credit card PDFs I'd never once looked at with suspicion. We aligned dates, cross-checked charges, pulled at threads until they became lines and the lines became a pattern. A client dinner in Seaholm matching a charge for a chef's tasting menu for 2. A late strategy session aligning with a rideshare receipt that ended near a boutique hotel. Weekend off-site meetings that synchronized perfectly with Sienna's text about team building at the lake and Adrian's fuel charges to a marina lot. When the dots kept landing on the same hours, you didn't need imagination, you only needed a ruler. Marina tapped the screen with a fingernail as if keeping tempo. That Friday, and the following Tuesday, and 2 Thursdays after. I nodded. The room was quiet except for the soft scrape of ceramic cups and the small clicks of apps opening again. It took an hour to arrive at a sentence that had been building for months. "At least 6, I said. At least, she agreed. She didn't cry. I didn't either. We weren't built for that in this moment. What I felt was colder and clearer, a horizon appearing once the storm spends itself. There are people who respond to a crisis by becoming smaller. Marina grew sharper like a lens coming into focus. "We'll keep this off the sidewalk," she said. "No public scenes, no social posts, no hallway theater." Silence gives strength. I found myself grateful for the phrasing. I didn't want a spectacle. I wanted gravity. Agreed. Good. She slid a card from a slim leather holder and set it on the marble like a chess move. The name read, Amara Quinn. Beneath it, a line Quinn, Sato, and Brandt. I'd heard of the firm. Most people in Austin had. The rumor was they won by doing the ordinary things with militant consistency. She does not believe in friendly fire, Marina said. She is expensive and she is worth it. Call before close of business. What do I need first, I asked. Practical felt better than emotional, like careful steps on ice. Access, she said. To your accounts, documents, statements. Back up your phone. Pull down anything you can without breaking laws or company policy. Change passwords. Freeze joint cards if your counsel advises it. Move valuables to a safe location. Document everything, dates, messages, sudden gifts, late nights. Keep a log starting today. I took out my notebook because the act of writing turned panic into tasks. She watched the list form, added items with the ease of someone who had done this before, perhaps not personally but professionally, in 10 other contexts that rhymed with this one. Do not confront him again, she continued. And do not engage in workplace correspondence that can be spun into harassment. If you must send anything, send it through counsel. No mic drops by email. No heat-of-the-moment declarations. Understood. She studied me for a second, measuring whether I meant it. You kept your voice steady earlier, she said. Keep it that way now. I looked past her to a framed photo on the far shelf, sunlit cliff, 2 silhouettes whined, caught in a dress. It must have meant something once. Now it was evidence of a habit the two of us apparently shared, building to last. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. How are you? I began, then stopped. The question felt both intrusive and irrelevant. She spared me. I won't waste this, she said. There are better uses for anger than noise. We went back to the screens. She scrolled through a month where Adrian's calendar said investor breakfast at 7:30 a.m., while his rideshare history showed a car leaving a hotel at 7:12. Another week where an internal dinner was billed as client entertainment, while the receipt notation in his expense tool said special occasion team. If you've ever watched a good accountant, you know what inevitability looks like. It looks like columns that must add up. I contributed what I had photos on the fridge that placed Sienna at a supposed all-hands night when 2 teammates had posted they were at home, a gift receipt tucked in a drawer for a bracelet I never saw, a dry cleaning ticket paid for on my card, but never picked up by me. None of it alone could carry the weight. Together, it held. When the shape of the timeline finally settled, Marina locked her phone and folded her hands. The move telegraphed the end of a meeting. A few more rules, Mr. Carter. Please. Eat. Sleep as close to normal as you can. Tell 1 trusted person, not 10. If your employer has an HR disclosure requirement, follow counsel's advice on timing and content. Do not freelance it. And no new debts. People make expensive, impulsive choices when they're hurt. Don't. The notion that I might try to patch a crater with purchases made me want to laugh. The sound stuck. Noted. She slid the business card closer. I took it, turning it once, feeling its weight, a thick stock densely inked. It looked like certainty in miniature. Thank you, I said, meaning it. Not for the coffee, for the structure. You're welcome. She stood. The meeting was over. One more thing, do not underestimate the board. At his company, her mouth tipped almost but not quite into a smile. Boards like quiet. This isn't quiet. On my way to the door, I paused. Why help me? Marina tilted her head, considering the only answer she might actually accept. Because you are in the same wreckage I am. Because the cleanest line to consequences is sometimes straight through, no theatrics. And because cooperation is efficient. Efficient. The word fit her like the blazer, like the gleaming kitchen, like the precision of her earlier, don't come home. I nodded and stepped onto the sunlit steps where Tarrytown kept pretending life was always this orderly. On the drive back, the city felt different but not hostile. I passed a food truck with a line of customers who didn't care about minefields and affidavits. I stopped at a red light and realized my hands weren't shaking. Tasks had replaced tremors. The card sat on the passenger seat like a compass, daring me to dare. I reached the bungalow just as the evening light slid down the block. Inside the house was the same and not the same. Photographs still magneted to the fridge, a coffee cup still in the sink. I put Marina's rules on the counter and began. Passwords changed. Cloud backup initiated. A new folder on my computer labeled Timeline. I wrote the date and time at the top of a legal pad and made the first entry arrived home early due to conference ending ahead of schedule. Found AV jacket in living room. Discovered spouse in bedroom with AV recorded brief clip. Speaker call from MV, don't come home. AV departed. Spouse requested to talk, declined. Left to meet MV, agreed to pursue legal counsel AQ. The act of writing steadied me. I opened the bank app and exported the last 12 months of statements. I scrolled, then stopped when a charge from a boutique hotel flagged my eye. The date matched one of Marina's calendar dots. I dragged the PDF into Timeline, added a bullet point, and kept going. By the time the clock edged toward 7, I had a dozen pages, a small architecture of dates and amounts, and a message drafted to the email on the card. I didn't hit send yet. I stood in the doorway of the dark bedroom and took one careful breath. The bed looked like a place where people once slept. That was all. I turned off the light and went back to the kitchen. The house creaked the way it always did when the air cooled and the oak shifted outside. On the counter, Amara Quinn was waiting in crisp black letters that didn't flinch. I picked up my phone, typed a subject line consultation request, fault-based divorce documentation available, and sent it. That was the pact. No noise, no scenes, no flailing. Evidence process forward. I rinsed the coffee cup, wiped the counter, and felt something I hadn't felt since the door had opened that afternoon. Control's faint outline returning like shoreline, emerging as the flood recedes. Tomorrow would be lawyers and paperwork and 100 small humiliations of form-filling and truth-telling. Tonight there was only the quiet of a house that wasn't lying anymore and the business card on the counter pointing me toward the next move. The next morning I woke before the alarm. Not because I wanted to, but because sleep had become impossible. My body was heavy, my mind buzzing. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, and in that silence, I felt the weight of everything pressing down. Betrayal has a way of dragging you out of bed whether you're ready or not. I showered, dressed in the kind of clothes you wear when you're not sure what role you're supposed to play, slacks, collared shirt, nothing that drew attention. Then I sat at the kitchen counter staring at the card Marina had slid across to me. Amara Quinn, Sato, and Brandt. The letters were crisp and unyielding as though they already knew the outcome. I dialed. Her assistant answered efficient and brisk. Quinn, Sato, and Brandt. How may I direct your call? This is Jude Carter. I was referred by Marina Voss. There was the faintest pause like the weight of that name carried through the line. One moment, Mr. Carter. When the line clicked again, the voice that came on wasn't rushed, but it was sharp enough to slice hesitation in half. Mr. Carter. I'm Amara Quinn. Tell me what happened in 3 sentences. 3 sentences. I swallowed, forced the chaos into order. I came home early. Found my wife with her boss, Adrian Voss. I have proof. Good. She said no hint of pity, no wasted words. Come in at 10. Bring every document you can access, bank statements, phone records, texts, anything unusual. Don't sanitize it. Don't dramatize it. Just bring it. And Mr. Carter, say nothing to your spouse until we've spoken. Yes, ma'am. Not ma'am, she corrected. Counsel. The line went dead. Her office sat on the 20th floor of a glass tower downtown. The lobby smelled like polished marble and fear. A receptionist with the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes led me to a waiting room where law journals lined the shelves like trophies. At 10 sharp, the door opened. Amara Quinn herself stood there, mid-40s, crisp navy suit hair pulled back in a knot so precise it could have been measured, eyes that didn't waver. She shook my hand with the kind of grip that told you she didn't waste time on anything half done. Mr. Carter, sit. Her office was all clean lines, steel desk, leather chairs, no family photos. The view stretched over downtown Austin, the Capitol Dome, a pale silhouette in the distance. "Let's begin." She folded her hands. "Texas recognizes fault-based divorce. Adultery is a fault. That means leverage. What we need is documentation." I slid across the folder I'd started building. Statements, receipts, screenshots, even the note I'd written about the exact time and words spoken the night before. She flipped through page by page, eyes narrowing not in judgment, but in focus. "This is a good start," she said finally, "but we'll need more. Dates, consistency. If you can link expenses or travel directly to the affair, it strengthens your position. Do not delete anything. Preserve every message, every receipt. Forward them to our secure email. We'll build the record." She leaned back slightly. "Now your goals. What do you want out of this?" The question froze me. I hadn't thought past survival. My marriage had detonated less than 24 hours ago, but she wasn't asking out of courtesy. She needed coordinates. "I want to protect myself," I said slowly, "my finances, my name, my sanity." "Fair," she replied, "and you'll get them if you follow directions." She began outlining steps, her voice even but unrelenting. "First, change all passwords. Email banking utilities. Do it today. Second, freeze joint credit cards if possible. If she attempts large withdrawals, it needs to be flagged immediately. Third, secure valuable property title documents, heirlooms, anything sentimental or financial. Fourth, keep communication minimal. If she reaches out, do not argue. Document it. Do not negotiate outside counsel. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said, scribbling notes as fast as I could. She gave me a measured look. "Mr. Carter, this is war dressed in paperwork. Do not underestimate the damage one careless text or outburst can do. Your silence will be your strength. Your documentation will be your weapon." Her words hit me harder than I expected. War. That was exactly what it felt like, and I was already drafted. She tapped her pen against the desk. "And one more thing. No public drama, no Facebook posts, no venting to co-workers, no barroom confessions. Judges do not reward noise. They reward discipline. You will give me discipline." I nodded. "Good. My retainer is substantial. Marina already warned you." She did. "Then sign." The contract was slid across the desk. I hesitated only for a heartbeat before signing. It felt less like putting ink on paper and more like crossing a line I could never step back over. Amara capped her pen. "Welcome to clarity, Mr. Carter. Painful clarity, but clarity nonetheless. Now go home and start building your case. We'll be in touch." Back in my car, I sat for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. Downtown bustled around me, horns, buses, people spilling out of coffee shops, but inside I felt still. Not calm exactly, but steadier. I drove back to the bungalow, unlocked the door, and began. I opened my laptop, created folders, labeled files, dragged every shred of evidence into place. Receipts, texts, bank records, each one a tiny cut, but together they built something solid, a wall between the life I thought I had and the one I actually lived. And as I typed out dates and attached files, I realized Amara was right. Silence was strength. Paperwork was power. This wasn't about shouting, it was about building a case so undeniable that when the hammer fell, it would fall clean. That night alone at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold, I wrote in my notebook day 1. The war has begun and my weapon is proof. A week passed before Sienna asked to meet. Not a day, not 7 long days of silence. In that time, I followed Amara Quinn's instructions like scripture. Passwords changed, accounts secured, evidence cataloged with the precision of a bookkeeper who knew every digit mattered. Each task felt less like paranoia and more like armor. So when Sienna finally called, her voice small and trembling, I already knew the script I would follow. "Jude, can we talk, please? Just once, face to face." Her words weren't a request, they were a test. My stomach twisted, but I agreed. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because closure often demands its own stage. We met in the living room, the very space where her boss's jacket had first betrayed her. She stood by the couch, clutching a tissue like it could hold her entire defense. Her eyes were swollen mascara smudged at the edges, hair pulled back in a way that felt less like style and more like surrender. I made a mistake, she began, voice breaking. A terrible, stupid mistake. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I stayed standing. Distance was its own kind of truth. You mean the jacket, the hotel receipts, the lies stretched across 6 months. My voice was steady, measured the way Amara had trained me to keep it. She winced. I was lonely, Jude. You were always working. You were distracted. Adrian. He made me feel seen, but it was wrong. I know it was wrong. I'll do anything to fix this. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Just don't throw away everything we've built. Her words were familiar phrases plucked from the self-help aisle from desperate conversations rehearsed in the mirror. They hung in the air like balloons losing helium. No, I said. The first time. Firm. Final. She blinked, startled. Please, just think about it. We could try separation first. Space, not finality. We don't have to destroy us. Us. That little word carried the weight of a promise she'd already burned. No, I said again, the second time. Louder not in volume, but in certainty. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She stepped closer, hand reaching for mine. I can't lose you. I'll leave my job. I'll cut ties with him. I'll prove it to you. Just don't let this be the end. I took a step back. Distance was the only mercy I had left to offer. No, the third time. Sharper than glass, cleaner than a blade. Her hand froze in midair. For the first time in this entire wreckage, she seemed to understand. Not the details, not the legal consequences, not the paperwork piling against her. She understood me. That I was finished. That no performance could bring me back. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting match could have been. Finally, she nodded through her tears. Then I'll go. She gathered a bag she'd left by the door, shoulders shaking. When she stepped onto the porch, the world outside was quiet. Our neighbor, Mr. Whitmore, was trimming his roses again, shears clicking in steady rhythm. He looked up, eyes meeting mine through the window. He didn't offer pity. He didn't look away. He just gave a small, firm nod. The kind of acknowledgement only an older man can give, a recognition that some endings don't need words. The door clicked shut. The house exhaled. I sank into the armchair, the same one where I'd found the jacket, and let the weight settle. Saying no 3 times had not made me lighter, but it had made me free. That night I wrote in my notebook, "There's power in refusal." I did not shout. I did not plead. I did not negotiate. I said no. 3 times. And sometimes no is the kindest, strongest word a person can speak. Marina didn't waste time. While I was still learning how to breathe in an empty house, she was already moving pieces across a board I barely understood. Where Sienna's pleas had been messy and emotional, Marina's response was precise, methodical, the way an architect might draft a demolition plan before laying a single brick. 2 mornings after Sienna left with her suitcases, my phone buzzed with a short message from her. 3 sentences, no greetings, no small talk, board escalated. Asset freeze initiated. He's cornered. It was the kind of update that sounded like it belonged to a war report, not a marriage. And yet that's exactly what it was. Adrian Voss had built his life on charm and intimidation, a smile for the boardroom, and a sneer for anyone who dared cross him. But charm doesn't work on accountants, and intimidation doesn't work on judges. When Marina unleashed her team, the paper trail that had been invisible for so long suddenly lit up like neon signs in the dark. Credit card charges, hotel invoices, jewelry receipts, all those little indulgences he thought he'd hidden under client entertainment or team building. The numbers didn't care about his reputation. They simply told the truth. Victor Lang, Marina's attorney, was the kind of man who seemed carved from stone. He filed motions faster than Adrian's lawyers could respond emergency freezes that locked down account subpoenas that reached into expense reports, requests for disclosures that spread like wildfire through his financial life. And then there was Ruth Feldman, the forensic accountant, who looked like she should be running a library somewhere. She was the most terrifying of all. Line by line, She dissected Adrian's empire, turning executive dinners into evidence and business retreats into proof of misconduct. Inside Voss Dynamics, the whispers started. At first, it was small employees speculating in hushed voices about why the audit team was suddenly pulling old expense reports. Then the whispers became louder until even the executive floor felt uneasy. Adrian called an emergency meeting, stood at the head of the table, and told his people this was nothing more than a misunderstanding. He smiled, tried to wave it off, said it would all blow over. But the board wasn't smiling. I wasn't in that room, but I could picture it from Marina's description. Avery Chan, the chairwoman of the board, sliding her glasses down her nose and asking questions that landed like hammer blows. Why had one employee received bonuses triple what her performance justified? How did a Lake Travis invoice list only 2 participants? On what planet were diamond earrings classified as client outreach? Adrian, the man who had once smirked at me in my own bedroom, had no answers that could survive the silence that followed. Corporate America has an unspoken code. You can have vices, even big ones, so long as you keep the company safe. They'll overlook arrogance, temper, even questionable ethics if the money keeps flowing and the lawsuits stay away. But when your behavior hands the legal department a live grenade labeled harassment patience, evaporates. Adrian hadn't just crossed the line. He'd set up camp on the other side of it. I remembered Amara Quinn's warning, don't get dragged into theatrics. No angry emails, no dramatic confrontations at the office, no attempts to play the hero in a fight already won. Steady wins, she told me, eyes sharp across her desk. Let him burn on his own. So I did. I stayed quiet. I let Marina and Amara drive the machine forward while I sat on the sidelines and watched Adrian's empire collapse under the weight of his own ego. The local business journal got wind of the story. At first, it was just a vague piece about allegations of misconduct at a prominent Austin firm. Within days, more details leaked. Anonymous sources, expense reports, hotel stays that matched late nights. It spread like gasoline across the industry. Investors, shifting in their chairs, clients second-guessing contracts. Adrian, desperate, tried to spin it as a personal matter. He hired PR consultants, floated a statement about a difficult period of transition and unfortunate misinterpretations. But spin doesn't erase bank statements. It doesn't erase the look on Avery Chan's face when she asked questions with no good answers. Marina's next message came 3 weeks later. Strategic sabbatical confirmed, effective immediately, which was corporate language for the board had shoved him out the door. They didn't fire him with spectacle. They simply cut his legs from under him, sealed the exits, and dressed it up in polite euphemisms. But everyone knew what it meant. Adrian Voss, who once held court at Christmas parties and treated men like me as background furniture, was out. I should have felt triumphant, maybe even vindicated. Instead, I just felt still. Like watching a storm you'd seen coming finally roll over the horizon. The damage wasn't surprising. It was inevitable. Adrian had smirked at me in my own house, so certain of his untouchable status. Now he was just another man undone by arrogance, another name whispered in boardrooms as a cautionary tale. That night I stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd once sat at 3 a.m, staring at the clock while my life unraveled. The silence was back, but it didn't feel as heavy as before. Outside, the oak tree we'd planted years ago swayed in the evening wind roots, deep branches steady. For the first time in months, maybe years, I realized I wasn't the one collapsing. I was still standing. And across town, the man who thought he'd won was watching everything slip through his fingers. The thing about secrets is that they only feel powerful when they're hidden. In the dark, lies take on a shimmer, a sense of importance, even a thrill. But once they're dragged into daylight, once every receipt and every excuse is exposed, they stop looking like passion and start looking like two people clutching each other in a burning building. That's what happened to Adrian and Sienna. Their story wasn't a romance anymore. It was survival. And survival was something neither of them was very good at. After Sienna walked out of our house with her suitcases, she must have thought she was stepping into something glamorous, some new chapter. where Adrian was the hero who had chosen her over everyone else. She didn't walk into a fairy tale. She walked into a mess. Marina's lawyers froze assets. Reporters circled like vultures. Board members tore Adrian apart behind closed doors. The man who once strutted like he owned half of Austin suddenly had no footing at all. I didn't need to follow their lives closely. Pieces of the wreckage floated back to me all the same. Marina had people everywhere, lawyers, private investigators, friends who worked at the right places. She would tell me things in short-clipped sentences that carried the weight of entire novels. Apartment above a bar, loud neighbors, arguments almost nightly, or rent unpaid for 2 weeks. Sienna using credit cards she cannot cover. I didn't even have to ask. The updates came like dispatches from a war front, proof that the storm was eating them alive. Sienna's fall was the most jarring to watch. She had gone from a carefully curated life, our house, our routines, her job with steady paychecks, to a shaky existence of borrowed couches and month-to-month leases. She wanted Adrian to be her safety net. He wanted her to be invisible while he scrambled to save his reputation. The reality they created together was nothing like the fantasy they had built in stolen evenings and whispered phone calls. The rumors spread through town. I heard from a neighbor's cousin who worked at Adrian's building that he and Sienna had been spotted fighting in the lobby, her voice sharp enough to slice through the marble. Another time, a mutual acquaintance said they'd seen her waiting in Adrian's car outside his office, arms crossed, glaring at the doors as if her sheer anger could drag him out faster. They weren't partners anymore. They were cellmates trapped in the prison they'd built together. And then came the night everything broke open. It happened in the most ordinary place imaginable, a Whole Foods parking garage on 6th Street. By then, Adrian's empire was already collapsing. His board had forced him into a strategic sabbatical, which was just a polite phrase for being fired. He was bleeding money on legal fees. Marina had carved up his accounts so efficiently that he was scrambling just to keep his lifestyle intact. And Sienna, well, she wanted more than a month-to-month studio with paper-thin walls. She wanted proof that he'd chosen her for real, that she hadn't thrown her life away for nothing. They pulled into the garage together, late evening, plastic grocery bags in the back seat. What should have been a quiet, domestic moment turned into an explosion. She accused him of stringing her along, of promising her a future he had no intention of giving. He accused her of dragging him down at the worst possible time, of making everything about her when he was trying to fight for survival. Voices echoed through the concrete like thunder. Witnesses said it was impossible to ignore. One woman who later recounted it to a friend described hearing the argument from across the garage, the sound bouncing off pillars, drawing stares from strangers heading to their cars. People didn't know if they should intervene or just keep moving. It wasn't violence in the sense of fists, but it was violence in every other way, words hurled like stones, promises shredded in real time. Then came the crack. Glass splintering against concrete. Adrian had grabbed her phone and thrown it as if destroying the device could erase the fight itself. It shattered against a support beam, fragments scattering across the oil-stained floor. The symbol could not have been clearer. The phone that once carried every secret text, every plan, every thrill of their affair, now lay in pieces impossible to put back together. Sienna dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the shards, as if piecing the plastic and glass back into shape could somehow restore the life she had chosen. People stared, but said nothing. Adrian stormed off toward his car, muttering about her being ungrateful, about how she didn't understand the pressure he was under. She sat there with tears streaking her face, palms nicked from sharp edges, clutching a ruined phone while strangers looked away. When Marina told me about it later, her tone was detached, almost cold. "They're doing the work for us," she said. "We don't have to lift a finger." And she was right. Adrian had burned through money, reputation, and control. Sienna had burned through loyalty, home, and stability. What was left was nothing more than two people tearing at each other in public, their great secret exposed as just another ugly argument in a parking lot. I thought about it for a long time. I pictured the scene in my head as if I had been there. Adrian's hand slicing through the air, the sound of glass cracking apart, her kneeling on the cold concrete with everyone watching. I imagined the humiliation, the sting of realizing she was no longer the woman with the upper hand, but just another voice shouting in a garage while her life unraveled. I didn't feel joy, not exactly. It wasn't triumph. It was something quieter, heavier, a recognition that balance had been restored in the cruelest way possible. They had set fire to 4 lives, mine, Marina's, and their own, and now they were choking on the smoke. That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at the ridiculous ceramic owl salt shaker Sienna once insisted we buy at a craft fair. I had mocked her for it, thought it was silly, but somehow it had stayed on the counter through all the storms. It was still there, cheerful and unbroken, while the people who had destroyed our marriage were now destroying each other. Strange how objects can endure longer than promises. I leaned back in my chair and realized that what Marina said was true. I didn't need to do anything. Their story had already ended. I was just watching the credits roll. After the parking garage scene reached me through Marina's matter-of-fact updates, I realized something had shifted. Adrian and Sienna were no longer even adversaries in my story. They were just people unraveling somewhere far from me. The war that had consumed my life for months was winding down. What remained was silence. And in that silence, a question, what now? The answer came the night I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the bed we had shared. The mattress felt heavy, suffocating, like it had absorbed every whispered lie and late-night betrayal. I lay staring at the ceiling for hours, and then just past 2 in the morning, I got up. I grabbed a screwdriver and began taking the frame apart 1 bolt at a time. It was clumsy, half-mad work, me in sweatpants and bare feet, dragging pieces of wood down the hall, stacking them like evidence in a trial no one else would ever see. The next morning, I rented a truck and hauled the pieces to the city dump. I watched the compactor crush it all into splintered shards and twisted metal. There was no drama, no applause. Just the grinding sound of machinery and the strange relief of seeing something I hated turned into nothing. Driving home, I realized I hadn't felt that light in months. That weekend, I called Gwen, a contractor I knew from a neighbor's recommendation. I want to strip the bedroom, I told her. Floors, walls, everything. Start fresh. She came with her crew the following Monday. The old carpet was ripped out, rolled up, and tossed into the dumpster. The walls, once painted in the safe beige Sienna had insisted on, were sanded and coated in storm blue paint. When the second coat dried, I stood in the doorway and felt like I was looking at a new house, one that finally belonged to me. I bought a new bed, solid oak frame, nothing ornate, just sturdy. Fresh white sheets, crisp and cool, untouched by history. The first night I slept in it, the silence of the house pressed around me, but it was no longer suffocating. It was clean, like breathing air after a storm. From there, the changes spread like dominoes. The living room couch she had chosen because it looked modern was gone, replaced by a sectional so big and soft it felt like falling into a hug. I rearranged the furniture, hung my own photographs on the walls, black and white landscapes from trips I had taken before marriage, reminders of a self I'd almost forgotten. The office was next. Once it had been curated for appearances, sleek, sterile, a place to impress visitors. Now I turned it into something that felt alive. My diplomas went up on one wall, framed baseball cards on another. I set a plant in the corner, a snake plant my mother swore even I couldn't kill. It'll thrive if you just let it, she said when she handed it to me. I didn't believe her, but I kept it anyway. What surprised me most was how physical work shifted the weight inside me. Every nail hammered, every brush stroke of paint, every piece of furniture carried out. The door was another layer of grief peeled away. I had thought healing would come through thinking through therapy sessions or late-night writing. Instead, it came through sweat and sore muscles, through dragging a sofa down the porch steps and feeling my lungs burn. Neighbors noticed. Mr. Whitmore, the man with the roses, paused at the fence one afternoon as I hauled a dresser into the truck. "Spring cleaning," he asked. Something like that, I said. He nodded as if he understood it wasn't about spring or cleaning. It was about reclaiming. By the end of that summer, the house didn't look like the place where my marriage had died. It looked like my house solid grounded, marked by choices that were mine alone. And that mattered more than I could have guessed. Every morning I woke up and saw those storm blue walls. I remembered the night I tore apart the old bed. It was a private ritual, a promise to myself never again would I share this space with lies. The strangest part was the calm that settled in afterward. For so long I had lived in reaction, reacting to discovery, to betrayal, to confrontation, to lawyers and court filings. But now the war was quiet. There was no one left to fight. The only thing in front of me was the work of rebuilding, and for once I didn't dread it. Sometimes late at night I would sit on the new couch with a cup of coffee and look around at the space I had remade. The walls no longer whispered, the silence no longer accused. I was alone, yes, but I was free. And freedom, even in its loneliest form, felt better than any version of captivity disguised as love. I wrote it down in my notebook, the same one where I had been keeping records since that night. This house is mine again. Not because she left, but because I stayed and changed it. You can burn a marriage, but you can build a home. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed it. When the dust settled at home, I turned my eyes to work. For years, my job had been something I trudged through, a steady paycheck that kept the lights on but left me hollow. I had carried exhaustion in my shoulders and resentment in my jaw, dragging myself into the office with the weight of a marriage that was already collapsing. But once the lies were gone and the house was mine again, something shifted. For the first time in years, I had space in my head. I wasn't burning energy on suspicion or arguments or rehearsing apologies that weren't mine to make. I could focus. It showed quickly. A messy account that had been bleeding money landed on my desk, one of those clients everyone avoided, because the problems were endless and thankless. Before I would have half solved it, patched it enough to keep complaints down. This time I sat down, rolled up my sleeves, and worked through it line by line. I stayed late not because I was escaping home, but because the work itself sharpened me. Numbers clicked into place. Strategies formed. By the end of the month, the client not only stayed, but expanded their contract. My manager, Omar, noticed. He stopped me one Friday, a rare smile breaking across his face. "You're different, Jude, more decisive. Keep doing whatever you're doing." By Christmas, I was promoted. A raise, yes, but more than that, a portfolio of clients big enough to scare me if I thought about it too long. And yet I wasn't scared. For the first time, I wasn't second-guessing myself into paralysis. I trusted my own judgment, and when I didn't know something, I admitted it and learned. There was no ego left to defend. Betrayal had already burned that out of me. Alongside the work came something I hadn't expected: boundaries. Simple words I had never been good at using. No. Not angrily, not with bitterness, just a calm, firm no. No to evening calls unless they were urgent. No to coworkers who dumped their unfinished projects on my desk. No to people outside of work who wanted me to play savior in problems they had created themselves. For years I had thought being agreeable was the only way to keep peace. But peace built on saying yes to everything was fragile, brittle. Now I said no, and the world didn't end. In fact, people respected it. At first it felt unnatural. My phone would buzz late at night and I'd feel the old reflex kick and answer, appease, smooth things over. But then I'd hear Amara Quinn's voice in my head. "Discipline is your weapon," and I'd let it go. The email would wait until morning. The world didn't collapse. Slowly my spine grew straighter. With those boundaries in place, space opened up for other things. I remembered the community center I had once signed up to volunteer at back before my marriage ate every ounce of energy I had. I walked in one Saturday half expecting they would have forgotten me. But Miss Chica at the front desk looked up, smiled, and said, "About time you showed up, Mr. Carter." She handed me a name tag like I'd been expected all along. That's how I met Zoe, a 9-year-old who glared at fractions as if they were personal insults. "Did she unmarry you?" she asked one afternoon while I helped her with homework. "Yes," I said, because that was the truth. "That sucks," she declared, then went right back to her worksheet. There was Marcus 11 who hated word problems with a passion. Why can't they just ask what 8 times 7 is instead of making up some dumb train schedule? Because life doesn't give you clean problems, I told him. He frowned, not fully understanding. But I did. More than I ever had. Saturday mornings at the center became routine. Teaching math to kids who didn't care about trains or fractions grounded me. They didn't know my story didn't care about Marina or Adrian or courtroom filings. They just wanted someone patient enough to explain long division without rolling their eyes. And in showing up for them, I found a piece of myself I thought had been lost. Outside the center, I stumbled into new circles, a hiking group that met early Sunday strangers who slowly became friends. There was Priya, who set the pace faster than anyone else, Mateo, who always brought too many granola bars, and Briar, who took photographs of every sunrise like each one was the first. None of them knew about the parking garage or the phone smashed to pieces. To them, I was just Jude, the guy who could keep pace for 10 miles and knew the best taco trucks afterward. That anonymity was healing. Therapy became another quiet routine. A plain office with neutral walls, a couch that swallowed me whole. I told the story over and over until it lost its ability to sting. My therapist taught me how to breathe through memories instead of choking on them, how to sit with anger without letting it drive the car. Healing wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Every session felt like tightening the screws on a structure that had been rattling for too long. Sometimes late at night, I would still wake with the weight of old memories pressing down. I would see the jacket, hear the voices, feel the walls close in. But then I'd remember the storm blue bedroom I had built with my own hands, the snake plant thriving in the corner, the kids at the center laughing at my bad jokes. And I'd remind myself the past is gone, but I'm still here. It struck me one evening as I locked the front door and turned off the lights I had stopped living in reaction. For months, everything had been about them, what they did, what they ruined, how I would respond. Now, for the first time, my life was about me. My choices, my work, my community, my boundaries. I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote it in my notebook. I am no longer the man they betrayed. I am the man who rebuilt. And when I closed the book, the silence in the house didn't feel like absence. It felt like peace. The first holiday season after Sienna left came faster than I expected. The months had blurred together. Legal meetings, renovations, long hours at work, weekends at the community center, and suddenly the air grew colder. Lights appeared in windows and people started asking where I'd be spending Thanksgiving. In years past, holidays had been negotiations. Whose family this year, who's the next? What time to leave one house so we wouldn't offend the other? Arguments about budgets for gifts, about whether the tree should be tasteful or fun. By the end of December, I always felt wrung out, like the holidays were just another battlefield dressed up in garland. This time was different. There was no negotiation, no schedules taped to the fridge, no performance to uphold, just quiet and choice. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke up late, made coffee, and turned on a football game before noon. I put a turkey sandwich together around 11:30 and ate it on the couch, my feet propped up, no one there to critique how messy it looked. There were no family photos being staged for social media, no arguments over which tablecloth looked best. It was just me, football humming in the background, and the taste of something simple but honest. Christmas followed the same way. I bought a small tree from a lot near the hardware store, dragged it into the living room, and decorated it with a box of ornaments I'd nearly forgotten I owned. They weren't coordinated, weren't curated. A glass ball from my childhood, a wooden star I'd carved years ago, a string of lights with one bulb that flickered like it had a mind of its own. It looked imperfect. It looked real. For gifts, I chose what I wanted, not what was expected. A bottle of bourbon for my father, a cookbook for my mother, toys for the kids at the center. I wrapped them badly taped at odd angles, paper wrinkled. No one cared. My parents didn't ask questions, didn't force me to rehash the story. They just hugged me, asked if I was eating vegetables, sent me home with leftovers. My father grumbled about the neighbor's tree leaning too far over his fence. My mother teased me about the plant she'd given me. Ordinary conversations, ordinary care. That was the gift. At the community center, the kids were buzzing with holiday energy. Zoe handed me a card she'd made from construction paper and glitter glue. Inside, in shaky letters, she had written, "Merry Chris, Miss Mr. Carter." "You are nice." Marcus tried to hide his excitement but grinned when I gave him a set of math puzzles disguised as games. "This isn't homework, right?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just fun." His smile told me it was the right choice. The hiking group planned a New Year's sunrise trek. We started before dawn, flashlights bobbing along the trail, the air sharp against our lungs. When we reached the ridge, the first light spilled across the horizon, painting the city below in pink and gold. Priya snapped a photo. Mateo passed out granola bars. Briar whispered, "This feels like a reset." I stood there, breath clouding in the cold air, and felt the truth of that. Work continued to grow in ways I hadn't predicted. The promotion had settled me into a rhythm of decisions and responsibilities that once would have terrified me. Now they energized me. Clients trusted me. Colleagues leaned on me. Omar gave me space to lead. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and steady was what I craved. Some nights I would come home from work, sit on the sectional, and notice how the house finally felt lived in again. The storm blue walls didn't feel like rebellion anymore. They felt like home. The snake plant thrived in the corner, taller than when my mother had handed it to me, proof that something could survive, even flourish, with just enough attention. The silence that once pressed on me now felt like a companion. It wasn't absence, it was peace. A different kind of fullness, one that didn't depend on anyone else's choices. When I wrote in my notebook at the end of that year, I didn't write about betrayal or courtrooms or the smirk on Adrian's face. I wrote about turkey sandwiches, Christmas lights, a kid's glitter card, a sunrise hike. Small things, ordinary things. The kind of things you don't notice when you're drowning in chaos, but once the water drains away, you realize they were the foundation all along. I closed the book, turned off the lights, and sat in the quiet of my rebuilt home. The year had ended not with noise, but with peace. And peace, I realized, was enough. Time has a way of sanding the edges off disaster. In the moment, betrayal feels like fire scorching every inch of your life. You think you'll never stop burning. But 3 years later, I can tell you this: the fire dies down. The ashes cool. And what's left is quieter than you imagine. 3 years after Sienna walked out with her suitcases, I ran into one of her old friends at the grocery store. I was pushing a cart, distracted, deciding between 2 brands of cereal when I heard my name. I turned and saw her, an acquaintance from parties I barely remembered, standing with a basket on her arm. She looked me up and down, then said, "You seem centered. Do you ever hear from her?" I shook my head. No. Just one word, but it carried a peace I hadn't known I could hold. No anger, no longing, no sharp edge, just absence, clean and final. She gave me a look that was half curious, half envious, and I realized then that gossip had carried Sienna's story further than I'd ever need to. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want answers. Whatever storm she was still caught in, it was no longer mine to track. As for Adrian, I heard he'd taken a sabbatical, the kind of phrase companies use when they don't want to say disgrace. There were whispers of consulting gigs that never panned out, rumors of investors turning cold. Marina, on the other hand, doubled down on her foundation, funneling her anger into scholarships for women in STEM. She turned her pain into something constructive, and I admired that from afar. We didn't talk often, but every now and then she would send me a brief message, "Still standing." I always replied, "Me too." At home, the life I had built didn't feel like a reconstruction anymore. It just felt like life. The storm-blue bedroom walls had faded slightly with time, but every morning when I opened my eyes, I still felt the strength in them. The oak bed frame held steady, the white sheets fresh and cool. The sectional in the living room bore the imprint of countless naps, late-night movies, and books I had finally allowed myself to read without distraction. The snake plant thrived, shooting up new leaves every season, green and unapologetic. My mother had been right, it didn't die. It grew alongside me, a silent witness to survival. Work had become more than a paycheck. The promotion years ago led to opportunities I hadn't expected. I led teams, now mentored younger analysts, even stood at conferences with a microphone in my hand, sharing strategies I'd once doubted I could even grasp. Omar had retired, leaving me with responsibilities that once would have crushed me. Instead, I carried them with steady shoulders. At the community center, the kids grew too. Zoe no longer struggled with fractions. She was in middle school now, taller, sharper still, blunt in a way that made me laugh. Marcus discovered he liked math puzzles after all, though he would never admit it outright. New kids came in, and I found myself showing them the same patience I had once struggled to give myself. The hiking group remained steady too. Priya moved to Denver. Mateo cut his hair and finally admitted he hated granola, and Breyer kept taking photographs of every sunrise. I went on fewer hikes as work expanded, but I always made time for at least one in January to watch the first dawn of the year spill across the hills. It reminded me that time keeps moving no matter how heavy one season feels. Family became simpler. My parents aged slower now, moving carefully around the kitchen but still teasing me in the same old ways. Holidays with them no longer felt like obligations. They felt like gifts. We didn't stage photos, didn't argue about tablecloths. We just ate, laughed, and watched football until someone dozed off in the armchair. Every so often, I thought back to the night it all began, the jacket on the chair, the sound of voices where they shouldn't have been. That memory used to crush me. Now it was just a page in a book I had already finished. I didn't open it often, but when I did, it didn't sting. It just reminded me of how far I had walked since. One evening, 3 years after the storm broke, I stood on my back porch with a cup of coffee. The sky was streaked pink and orange, the air cool against my face. The oak tree we had planted years ago had grown taller roots, deep branches steady. I thought about everything that had been lost and everything that had been built in its place. I realized then that revenge had never been about watching them suffer. It wasn't about waiting for news of Adrian's disgrace or Sienna's chaos. It wasn't about court filings or shattered phones in parking garages. The best revenge was this: a life that no longer needed them. No scoreboard, no comparisons, just mornings in a home that felt like mine work, that mattered people who stayed, and peace that didn't need performance. I took a sip of coffee, looked at the horizon, and wrote the final line in my notebook, 3 years in the light. Survival is enough, and enough is everything. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.